Welcome everybody. It's your baby girl Queen Bee. On today's episode of Justice Under Pressure Systems That Break People, we will be discussing the fallacies and loopholes that are in our justice system. Today's episode dives into the fragile fractures of Los Angeles justice systems, criminal courts, law enforcement, and child welfare. These institutions were designed to protect the innocent and safeguard families, yet history and data tell a different story. That innocence can be ignored, families can be dismantled, and truth can be buried when systems reward power rather than justice. Well, that's a mouthful, so let's get to it. To understand how deeply things can go wrong, we start with one of the largest police corruption scandals in American history, the LAPD Rampart scandal, which erupted publicly in 1999 after Officer Rafael Perez confessed to years of corruption inside the Crash anti gang unit. Perez admitted that he and others planted drugs, framed suspects, fabricated reports, and committed perjury. His testimony implicated over 70 police officers. Wow. The scandal stretched from 1997 to 2000, but its roots went far deeper into the decade. The consequences were staggering. 106 criminal convictions were overturned, and the city of Los Angeles paid roughly $125 million in settlements to people whose lives had been destroyed. Rampart was just not the only case of a few corrupt officers. It exposed a culture where misconduct was rewarded and oversight was almost non existent. Supervisors ignored the red flags, perjury became routine, vulnerable defendants, mostly Black and Latino young men, were definitely pressured into guilty pleas because they lacked the means to challenge LAPD's narrative. These wrongful convictions were not isolated. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, the United States has recorded over 3,700 exonerations since 1989, and Los Angeles County remains one of the nation's highest producing jurisdictions for wrongful convictions. LAPD related misconduct plays a significant role. A 2023 study by UCLA and UC Berkeley identified 89 exonerations in Los Angeles County involving police misconduct, and more than half had direct connections to the Rampart era. Wow. The cost of these wrongful convictions wasn't just financial. Through the costs ran into hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. The true cost was in human lives. Now, let's talk about one of the most heartbreaking examples was Maurice Hastings, who was convicted in 1983 of a murder that he did not commit. He always maintained his innocence for nearly 40 years. Hastings petitioned for DNA testing, and for decades, those requests were denied. It wasn't until 2022 that DNA evidence finally cleared him up, proving another man had committed the crime. Hastings walked free after 38 years of wrongful imprisonment. His case demonstrates exactly how the system fails prosecutors who refuse to revisit evidence, the courts denied testing that could have freed him, and the presumption of guilt overshadowed any duty to seek the truth. Maurice Hastings is just one of many, to be honest. A 2015 analysis estimated that wrongful convictions cost California over $220 million, people. In settlements, retrials, and in incarceration costs, much of that stemming from LA County cases, which brings me to the point as to why LA County has been suffering a budget deficit and why they have not been spending that money into useful resources like building youth centers, homeless shelters, soup kitchens and whatnot, housing for families of low income, because they just can't get it right. Downtown Los Angeles, Clara Shortridge Folds Criminal Justice Center processes some of the county's highest profile and highest volume criminal cases. It is a building where defendants often face impossible odds. Public defenders in the Los Angeles area routinely handle up to 300 active cases at once. With such huge caseloads, there is often little time for investigation, expert witnesses, or a thorough defense preparation. The result? Defendants, especially poor defendants, feel coerced or pressured into taking plea deals even when they are innocent. Combined with prosecutorial leverage, the imbalance is enormous. Prosecutors can stack charges, add enhancements, threaten decades long sentences, and essentially force pleas. A defendant without strong representation faces an impossible choice. They either accept the plea or risk losing everything at trial, which is what happened in my case. This systematic structure, overworked with public defenders, aggressive charging practices, and judicial pressure to move cases quickly, creates a courtroom environment where the truth is secondary to efficiency. And once again, the consequences are life altering, y'all. Over prosecution is not merely the result of individual bad actors, it is a product of structural incentives. Conviction rates boost careers. So once get prosecutors promoted, they can also get elected to become LA County or the county district attorneys. And yeah, political pressure. District attorneys are elected officials, so they're tough on crime, quote unquote, wins votes, even when quote unquote tough means charging excessively or ignoring exculpatory evidence or evidence that can definitely clear a defendant of any crime. There is also a power imbalance. Prosecutors hold all the cards. They make the charging decisions, they offer plea offers, access to investigative resources. Poor defendants rarely have the tools to fight back. There is also a huge lack of accountability, everybody. Prosecutors are almost never disciplined or misconduct. There is no committee that oversees these prosecutors. The only thing you can do is report them to the LA County Bar Association or California Bar Association. And even then, they don't really do the thorough investigation that they should to hold these prosecutors accountable. They are told that, there's not much that they can do, right? Another thing I wanted to talk about, prosecutors, even when wrongful convictions are overturned, they're still not disciplined or fired. This fosters a culture where cutting corners is normalized, and it creates a system where innocence is not a safeguard anymore. Shifting from criminal justice to child welfare, we find similar systematic pressures in the Los Angeles County DCFS, shaped in part by federal policy. In 1997, President Bill Clinton signed the Adoption and Safe Families Act, that law that aimed to prevent children from lingering in foster care, but its execution created financial incentives for adoption. So states receive federal bonus funds for each child adopted above a baseline. So they get like $4,000 per child. And if the child has special needs, they get an extra $2,000. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Additional funds are awarded for special needs adoptions. Permanency, especially adoption, is financially rewarded. Reunification is not, which is why a lot of these social workers, people, they really push for parental rights termination, especially if the children are between the ages of 0 to 2 years to 24 months. That's when they're really pushing for permanency, for adoptions. And they're not really trying to push for family reunification services. So even if the parents are complying by going to therapy, by taking the classes that are court appointed at their own expense, because the court doesn't pay for it, they still expect you as a parent to pay out of pocket for your therapy as well as the classes, right? And imagine showing up to court and being told that you are an unfit parent, quote unquote, and your babies get removed and placed in adoption with a family that they've never even met. Yeah. For a system under budget pressure, adoption becomes the most efficient path to permanency. Infants are adopted at particularly high rates because they are considered easily adoptable. These incentives shape the behavior of agencies and courts even when not intended. For parents, especially low-income parents who face DCFS involvement, the deck is similarly stacked. A 2023 study on the Los Angeles child welfare outcomes noted that parental rights are terminated in surprising numbers even when parents comply with case plans, especially in cases involving infants. Compliance does not always equal reunification. Sometimes delays, caseworker turnover, or risk adverse decisions push cases toward permanent and adoption instead. And sometimes, you guys, these social workers, they will falsify reports. They will provide misleading information to the courts in order to speed up the adoption process. Even if the parents are doing their due diligence and attending the classes, going to therapy, the social worker could still lie in the report and say, oh, these parents are unfit because they continue to fight. Or so one of the parents is homeless or still struggles with substance abuse. And even though the person is actually sober, they will falsify those reports just to get them with their parental rights terminated. The Maggie versus DCFS appellate decision reveals how misleading information with DCFS can reshape a child's entire future. Maggie was incarcerated when she gave birth to her daughter, AC. She designated her godmother, Mary Kay, as a caregiver during her sentence, and Mary agreed. But when DCFS filed its report to the juvenile court, it misrepresented Mary's availability, implying she could not take the child. Based on that misrepresentation, the juvenile court declared AC a dependent of the court. Maggie participated in every available program in prison and maintained a relationship with her daughter, yet DCFS continued portraying her situation as unstable, and the court terminated her parental rights. Wow. On appeal, the appellate court found that DCFS failed to present accurate information about Mary Kay's willingness to care for AC. That failure dramatically shaped the court's decisions that ultimately severed Maggie's parental rights. Her case reflects a system where the state's narrative carries more weight than a parent's truth. Now let's talk about Gabriel Fernandez. The most tragic example of DCFS system failure remains the case of 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez, who died in 2013 after abuse. Despite 60 reports, everybody, to DCFS, despite teachers and family members begging for help, despite visible injuries, in Gabriel's own words, the system repeatedly downgraded his risk level. Supervisors allegedly instructed staff not to elevate certain reports. Paperwork was altered, calls were coded incorrectly, and Gabriel paid the price. His death led to criminal charges against 4 DCFS employees, but in the end, the charges were dismissed. A blue ribbon commission issued recommendations, but many systematic problems remain. High caseloads, poor oversight, a culture of fear and liability, and a system that struggles to separate genuine risk from poverty. When we examine these stories, Rampart, Hastings, Clara Holtz, DCFS, the Adoption and Safety Families Act, Maggie, Gabriel, a pattern is quickly seen, everybody. Power accumulates at the top. Incentives shape outcomes more than truth. Vulnerable people, the poor, the incarcerated, the unrepresented, are most at risk. Systems prioritize efficiency, not accuracy. They value more quantity than quality, everybody. Families and individuals are harmed when institutions pursue metrics over humanity. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that also prosecutors are given quotas that they have to meet. Same thing with detectives, police officers. So a lot of police officers and detectives have been known to commit perjury during their trials, or they'll also falsify police reports in order to meet those quotas. Yeah. At tax-paying dollars expense, everybody. Yeah. Wrongful convictions and wrongful family separations may seem like separate crises, but they are deeply connected. In both areas, the government holds immense power, and this safeguards intended to protect people often collapse under pressure. Whether it's a defendant in a downtown courtroom facing a prosecutor's stacked charges, or a mother in dependency court fighting to keep her child despite complying with every requirement, or a boy whose cries for help were systematically coded out of significance. The theme is the same. When power is unchecked, justice becomes optional, if not non-existent. To fix these systems, we must first acknowledge their flaws. Over prosecution, under defense, financial incentives that distort child welfare, and Bureaucratic cultures that prioritize risk management over human lives. Justice under pressure breaks people, but with accountability, transparency, and a willingness to confront the structural incentives at the root of these failures, justice can be rebuilt. Thank you for listening. Stay aware, stay involved, and stay committed to justice, specifically for those who have at least power to demand it.